Hello, friends. My name is Dan White Jr., and I'm a church planner, author, and coach with the V3 movement. We're trying something new out here, and we're taking your questions through Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and doing our best to offer you some discernment and reach into our experiences and potentially even offer you some best practices. I planted a church almost 10 years ago here in Syracuse, New York, and I was convinced that I didn't want to plant a church revolving around bands, budgets, buildings, and bishops, the 4Bs. I was passionate about planting a church revolving around locally rooted presence, boundary crossing mission, tight-knit community, and life-forming discipleship. But I didn't really know how to do that. I had read quite a few books. I had a whole lot of idealism stirring around in my brain, but I didn't have any real-time guides. And so out of that comes some compassion for church planners who are facing challenges locally in their neighborhoods, trying to be the church in a new but old way. So we wanted to offer you a space to work through some of those questions. We're purposely going to keep this short. I don't know if this first one will be short, but 3 to 5 minutes. And we're also committed to keeping it raw and unpolished. We didn't want this to be a training video, more of a space for us to work through some discernment. So, without further ado, the first question that came in was, where is the first place you would start in planting a missional church? I would start with discipleship. Now, I know that word is a sexy word. There's a lot of buzz around discipleship. I do think there's some healthy conviction happening nationally around how we have lost discipleship, and we need to get back to those core moorings of how Jesus lived on earth with a core of disciples. I think there's something healthy brewing there. For me, discipleship is theological and practical and is rooted in how I planted my own church almost 10 years ago. We started with just a core of people, 5 plus my wife and I, so 7 of us, some friends, and we committed to a 9-month intensive, a discipleship pathway together. We covenanted to a rule and rhythm of life around transformation. It ended up lasting more than 9 months, almost lasted a year. But we realized that we needed to grow some emotional, spiritual, and physical muscles around being Jesus followers together in the place that we lived. And the natural question would be is, what do you disciple people in? Most of our experiences of discipleship, I actually just took a survey of 120 pastors at a conference I spoke at, and it was an anonymous survey with those 120 pastors, and only 9% of the pastors in that room had actually been discipled themselves. Most of their transformation came through professors or podcast preachers or books. And this reveals that we are all, even our leaders, are in a state of not being formed for real-time, embodied, incarnational discipleship. most of our learning is very cognitive. When our learning is primarily cognitive, there's an inertia towards hypocrisy, of believing we are something that our bodies aren't actually practicing. So our discipleship has to draw us into a way of living. When we look at Luke chapter 6, we discover, I think, three movements around discipleship. I don't think these are the secret sauce, but they just helped me bring a certain minimalism to discipleship that others can orient around with me in mutuality. And in Luke chapter 6, we see that Jesus, who is the first church planner, spends time with the Father, goes up a mountain and spends time with the Father. And then it says he comes down off the mountain and gathers 12 disciples. And then he takes those 12 disciples and moves into the town and teaches them how to heal the sick and feed the poor. There's three things that happen there. Communion with God, the Father, and the Spirit. Jesus experiences that communion, then comes down and creates a little micro community of disciples, a place of shared life that he and others will live in for 3 years together, and then takes them on mission or co-mission together in a real place and time. I think these three things, communion, community, and commission, give us a schema, the possible scaffolding for a discipleship pathway that we can journey in through together. So crafting a discipleship pathway that a few people, 3 to 5 to 8 to 10, any more than that, I think that it loses a space of a personal space and an intimate space with one another. We journey through that for 9 months, and then the question is not just what do we discipled in, but how do we do discipleship? The how, I think, also bumps up against the thick cognitive environment that we're in, especially with the amount of information that we have via the internet, and the way people learn is primarily information binging. There's a certain, I think, resistance and rebellion we need to have against how disembodied we are and how information heavy we are. Now, I do think there's a place for information. So in our discipleship, we need to consider that we are whole beings, beautifully made in the image of God. We are mind, we are soul, we are body. Jesus discipled in this way, bringing into discipleship prophetic and disruptive information, then asked really good soul questions around who we are and why we're afraid and why we're holding on to our idols, and then also moved into bodied practices. So in discipleship, we need to ask concrete questions that are formational. The first is meta, the mind. A meta is anything that comes to the surface, a big idea. A meta moment is when we have an aha around information. We need to ask those questions in our discipleship. Where are you experiencing a meta? Where is this information coming to the surface for you around community, and commission? The second question we ask is reflective. So we move from meta to reflective. And reflective is where is this in my soul bringing conflict, clarity, or confusion for me? Where might there be a feeling of inadequacy or anger or fear or uncertainty? We need to ask questions about who we are as we are practicing and being exposed to practices around community, and commission. Then we ask, from meta to reflective, we ask experiential questions, and that is the body. How can we this week practice with our bodies. Come up with an experiment that will move us from head to heart into the world. Experiential practices that sometimes we do together, sometimes we do as we scatter individually. These three tools have been exceptionally helpful and transformative in my own practice: communion, community, and commission, and meta, reflective, and experiential learning. I hope this has been jogged something for you and been helpful for you, maybe meaningful for you. I really look forward to some of the fresh questions that will come this coming week. Peace to you, friends.